Have you ever held your tongue, hoping that a moment of silence would shift the balance of power in your relationship or conversation? You stay quiet, counting on your absence of words to speak volumes. Yet, when the silence lingers, nothing changes. They continue as though you never uttered a single word, never noticed your withdrawal. This frustration can sting. Why isn't your silence having an impact on them? Why does your deliberate pause fall flat? In this video, we delve into the real reasons your silence isn't making the difference you desire, and, more importantly, we'll explore timeless Stoic techniques to reclaim your sense of control and inner tranquility. Section 1. The illusion of control through silence. We often fall prey to the notion that silence is a form of power, a subtle, unspoken currency that can be spent to manipulate the dynamics of our relationships and the course of our interactions. In our minds, silence is a gambit, a calculated withdrawal of our presence intended to provoke disquiet, to compel the other party into an anxious dance of apology or explanation. We envision their discomfort, imagine the silent gap growing heavy with regret, and anticipate a moment of reckoning when they finally acknowledge our unspoken pain. Yet, this strategy is grounded in an illusion. It assumes that the value of your silence lies in the other person's need to fill the void. It supposes they prize your words so highly that their absence becomes a wound they must address. But what if they do not care? What if they neither notice nor value your withdrawal? Under the Stoic lens, we recognize that silence in itself carries no intrinsic weight. It is simply the absence of sound, devoid of meaning until we project our intentions onto it. When silence is used as a tool for coercion, it misconstrues the fundamental nature of influence. True influence emerges not from withholding, but from alignment. In Stoicism, we learn that the realm of influence begins within our mind and actions, not in the responses of others. We assume that our silence can unsettle another because we overestimate our importance in their inner world. We believe that our absence of speech will cause disturbance, while in reality, many pass through life scarcely noticing the rise and fall of our voices. At the heart of this misapprehension is a misunderstanding of where control truly resides. We imagine that by holding our words, we hold the power to shape outcomes. But this view places our agency in external hands. We surrender our peace to the unpredictable tides of another's reaction. Stoics remind us that our truest power is exercised in the choices we make, choices governed by reason and virtue, rather than by a desire to enforce compliance in others. When we choose silence for the sake of manipulation, we have already relinquished the serenity that comes from acting with integrity. Silence, when wielded as a weapon, is hollow. It offers no genuine message unless accompanied by clarity of purpose. In the absence of explicit explanation, the meaning of our silence is left to the imagination, often to be misconstrued or dismissed altogether. The void can be filled by confusion, indifference, or even contempt. Without the guiding light of virtue, our silence is a cloak of ambiguity that conceals nothing but our intentions. Consider the emotional architecture that underpins our faith in silence. We anticipate guilt in another's heart, as though our pain is a beacon that drives them toward remorse. But guilt is not a natural response to absence. It is earned through accountability. In Stoicism, we learn that any response in another, regret, defensiveness, indifference, is theirs alone to own. We cannot command another's moral compass by veiling our voice. We can only direct our compass toward honesty and honor. Moreover, we tend to overestimate the emotional gravity of our silence because we project our sensitivity onto others. To us, silence can feel like a thunderclap, an abrupt severing of connection that rattles the soul. Yet, for someone less attuned to emotional nuance, it may register as little more than a change in atmosphere. We mistake our inner turmoil for a universal signal. A Stoic approach calls us to examine this projection, to question whether our perceived power in silence reflects reality or merely the contours of our mind. Beyond projection, there is also a clash of communication styles. Some people are moved by emotional undercurrents, others engage through dialogue, logic, or direct action. Silence may deter one type of person, but it may simply bewilder another. When we rely on silence to influence, we ignore the diversity of human temperaments. We assume a one-size-fits-all effect, where none exists. The Stoic emphasis on reason instructs us to discern the appropriate mode of engagement, whether speech or quietude, based on what we can control, our judgment, not the unpredictable sensitivities of others. Finally, we must confront the power imbalance that often underlies our use of silence. In relationships skewed by authority or dependency, silence can be perceived not as a challenge, but as surrender. When the stronger party retreats, the weaker may simply step forward, filling the gap without missing a beat. In this scenario, silence cedes ground rather than seizing it. It confirms the hierarchy rather than subverting it. A Stoic soul sees that authentic authority arises not from coercive tactics, but from consistency, fairness, and moral courage. In sum, the illusion of control through silence rests on several false assumptions: that others value our words as we do, that absence of speech inherently conveys a message, that silence can wield guilt as a weapon, and that silence will be universally understood as a sign of protest. Stoicism teaches us to dismantle these assumptions. It invites us to replace the empty gambit of silence with the solid foundation of virtuous action. It reminds us that our power resides in our own choices, choices guided by wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, irrespective of the responses they yield. Section 2. Stoic Foundations on What Truly Matters. Beneath each human impulse to shape the world through quiet withdrawal lies a deeper framework of beliefs and values. The Stoics teach us that to reclaim genuine power, we must first anchor ourselves in what truly matters. This foundation rests on two pillars: the dichotomy of control and the elevation of virtue as the sole good. At the heart of the Stoic worldview is the profound recognition that our existence divides neatly into what we can govern and what we cannot. Our thoughts, judgments, desires, and actions are ours to direct. Every choice born in the theater of our mind, every moment we decide to act with reason rather than react in passion, belongs within our domain of mastery. Conversely, the reactions of others, the unfolding of events beyond our immediate will, and the whims of fortune lie irrevocably beyond our grasp. We can instruct our conduct, but we cannot script the movements of the world or the hearts of those around us. This dichotomy does more than clarify boundaries. It liberates us from needless frustration. When we cling to the fantasy that silence will compel change in another, we misallocate our energy toward forces we cannot bend. We mistake the external terrain for our field of responsibility, wielding silence as a blunt instrument against those whose response is inconsequential to our inner worth. The Stoic remedy is to turn inward, to cultivate an unshakable fortress of reason that neither solicits nor fears the approval of others. In this stronghold of self-governance, real influence emerges not from external manipulation, but from unflagging consistency with our highest principles. The second pillar of Stoic wisdom proclaims that virtue is the sole good, the yardstick by which all actions must be measured. Virtue encompasses wisdom, the lens through which we discern what aligns with nature; courage, the fortitude to act rightly amid fear; justice, the commitment to fairness in our dealings; and temperance, the discipline to maintain balance within. Anything outside this core, wealth, reputation, silence used as a gambit, holds only an indifferent status. Such externals may be preferred or disfavored based on context, but they do not define the worth of our character or the tranquility of our soul. When silence is adopted for motives of vanity, vengeance, or coercion, it veers from virtue and becomes an indifferent tool. It neither elevates the spirit nor fosters harmony. It drapes itself in ambiguity, leaving both speaker and listener untethered from purpose. Yet when silence arises from wisdom, chosen to maintain equanimity, to pause before responding, to reflect on the better path, it becomes an extension of virtue itself. In that moment, silence is not an absence, but a deliberate action aligned with justice and temperance. It signals introspection, not manipulation. To dwell in the Stoic foundation is to view each impulse towards silence through the lens of virtue. We ask, does this choice honor reason or betray it? Does it stem from justice or from the desire to punish? Does it reflect courage, the willingness to stand firm in what is right, or does it shrink from confrontation cloaked in moral ambiguity? These questions tether our decisions to the compass of character. They transform silence from a potential weapon into a mindful expression of inner strength. Moreover, the dichotomy of control and the primacy of virtue converge in a singular practice, the premeditation of reactions. When faced with friction, the Stoic warrior pauses to consider which aspects lie within his power. He recognizes that the only path to serenity is through rigorous self-examination, ensuring that his actions, speech, silence, or otherwise, emanate from sound judgment rather than from a craving to alter outcomes. In doing so, he dissolves the illusion that his silence must cast shadows over another's conscience, and instead rests in the luminous perspective that his integrity stands apart from the turbulent sea of external events. Thus, the Stoic foundations on what truly matters impart a radical transformation of intent. Silence is no longer measured by its capacity to unsettle, but by its fidelity to virtue. Control is no longer tethered to the unpredictable motions of others, but to the steadfast governance of one's mind. In this reorientation, we discover that the only power worth wielding is the power to be true to ourselves, to nature, and to the unyielding principles that form the bedrock of a life well lived. Section 3. Understanding the real reasons your silence falls flat. Beneath our expectation that silence will compel change lies a tangled web of hidden motivations and unexamined assumptions. To penetrate this web, we must turn our gaze inward and confront three fundamental truths: the misalignment of our intentions, the murky realm of unspoken boundaries, and the danger of surrendering rational agency to emotional reactivity. First, we discover that silence often springs not from a desire for wisdom or virtue, but from a yearning to feel validated, powerful, or secure. When we withhold our voice, we imagine ourselves wielding influence. Yet the true aim is to shore up creaking self-esteem or to force recognition. This misalignment reveals a crucial Stoic insight. We must scrutinize our motives. Virtue demands that our actions emerge from reason, not from the covert pursuit of emotional gratification. If the silence we impose is intended to elicit guilt or remorse, we have strayed from the path of justice. We borrow power from another's conscience, only to find ourselves bankrupt of genuine peace. A virtuous agent pauses to ask, am I silent to uphold what is right, or silent to soothe my insecurities? Clarity of purpose becomes the antidote to such hidden impulses. Second, silence conceals our true boundaries in a fog of ambiguity. We presume that the absence of speech signifies disapproval or marks a line that must not be crossed. Yet without explicit articulation, our boundary becomes an uncharted territory. Others may stumble aimlessly, unaware of the walls we have erected. Stoicism instructs us to clear this fog by translating unspoken expectations into precise declarations. It is not enough to fall silent and hope for change. We must frame our boundary with wisdom and temperance, stating with calm conviction what we will accept and what we will not. In doing so, silence becomes a complement to honest communication rather than a stand-in for it. When boundaries are laid bare, our self-respect is manifest, and we no longer lean on the shaky scaffold of cryptic signals. Third, we must guard against the silent trap of emotional reactivity. In moments of hurt or anger, our first instinct is to retreat inward, ceasing speech as though by silence we can stifle the pain. Yet this instinct often betrays us, replacing thoughtful agency with a cloud of emotion. Stoicism calls for rational engagement. We choose our response after pausing to reflect, rather than letting a surge of feeling dictate our comportment. When we act from rational agency, our silence can be a deliberate tool, an interval of calm in which we gather our faculties, reconsider our stance, and decide whether words or quietude best serve the good. Without this discipline, we risk remaining mute out of fear, pride, or confusion, and later regretting the unspoken words that might have clarified our intent or conveyed our virtue. Together, these three pillars illuminate why silence by itself is rarely transformative. Left unchecked, our inner motives corrode integrity, ambiguous boundaries breed misinterpretations, and unchecked emotions hijack our judgment. To render silence potent, we must first align it with virtue, articulate our limits with clarity, and wield it through the lens of reason. Only then does our silence transcend mere absence and become an authentic expression of Stoic agency. In the crucible of introspection, we refine our impulses. We learn to observe the stirrings of desire for validation and transmute them into a steadfast commitment to justice. We replace unsaid grievances with transparent limits grounded in courage and temperance. We transform emotional turbulence into the calm deliberation befitting a Stoic mind. Through this alchemy, silence acquires meaning, not as a weapon of manipulation, but as a mirror of our highest principles. Ultimately, the silence that fails to resonate with others is the silence untethered from virtue. When we mistake our own emotional needs for moral imperatives, when we cloak our boundaries in riddles, and when we forsake rational reflection, we forsake the very essence of Stoic mastery. To break this cycle, we must recommit ourselves to the inner discipline of the Stoics, to examine motives with honesty, to declare principles with clarity, and to act with unwavering reason. In doing so, our silence ceases to fall flat. It becomes a living testament to our sovereignty over self, radiating a presence more powerful than any word. Section 4. Stoic Techniques to Reclaim Control. Stoicism offers a treasury of practices designed to restore mastery over oneself, even when external circumstances seem overwhelming. These techniques are not quick fixes to force another's hand, but disciplined exercises that refine our judgment, strengthen our resolve, and root our actions in virtue. By integrating these methods into daily life, we shift our focus from the fickle reactions of others to the steadfast governance of our minds. One of the most fundamental Stoic tools is the deliberate pause. When the impulse to use silence as a weapon arises, we insert a moment of reflection between stimulus and response. In that pause, we pose the essential question: what lies within my control? We recognize that while we cannot dictate another's feelings or behavior, we can choose whether to speak or remain still, guided by reason rather than impulse. This pause becomes the crucible in which raw emotion is transformed into measured action. Recorded in a Stoic journal, the reflection on these moments illuminates patterns, revealing when silence aligns with wisdom and when it masks insecurity. Closely related is the practice of premeditatio malorum, or negative visualization. By mentally rehearsing scenarios in which our silence has no effect or even backfires, we inoculate ourselves against disappointment. We envision the conversation that continues unaltered, the misunderstanding that deepens, and the indifference that greets our retreat. In doing so, we detach our sense of well-being from outcomes, discovering that our tranquility does not hinge on the responses we receive, but on the integrity of our intentions. With each anticipated setback, we fortify our equanimity, so that when reality falls short of our hopes, we remain unshaken. A third essential practice is the clear articulation of personal values. Virtue must not be an abstract ideal, but a concrete guide for daily conduct. We distill our core principles, honesty, justice, courage, temperance, into concise statements that inform both speech and silence. When faced with conflict, we recall these declarations. Silence is chosen only if it upholds temperance. Words are spoken only if they serve justice. By anchoring decisions in declared values, we eliminate the drift of unexamined motives and ensure our silence is not a cloak for avoidance, but a beacon of integrity. The fourth technique revolves around emotional detachment from outcomes. We train ourselves to act solely based on principle, not on the expectation of influence. Each time we prepare to speak or remain silent, we silently affirm, "I do this because it is the right action, not because it will compel change." This mantra realigns our focus inward as we derive satisfaction from fidelity to virtue rather than from another's capitulation. Over time, this detachment breeds resilience, freeing us from the frustration that arises when our silent gambit falls flat. Finally, Stoics encourage us to reframe silence as an act of self-care rather than punishment. Withdrawal from conversation need not be a means to inflict guilt, but a space for inner restoration. In those intervals of quiet, we engage in mindful awareness, observing the rise and fall of our breath, noting the stillness of our mind, and reaffirming our commitment to rational control. Silence becomes a refuge for the soul, a moment to regroup and reinforce our commitment to the Stoic path. When we emerge from this practice, our words carry the clarity of someone who has paused, reflected, and chosen to act with purpose. By weaving these techniques into the tapestry of our daily experience, we transform silence from an empty tactic into an instrument of self-mastery. We learn not only to reclaim control over our inner domain, but to find in each moment, spoken or unspoken, the opportunity to embody the enduring principles of Stoicism. Section 5. Practical Exercises. Theory without practice remains inert. Stoic wisdom demands active engagement with our precepts. To internalize the principles we have explored, we propose a series of disciplined exercises designed to sharpen self-awareness, clarify purpose, and reinforce rational agency. These practices are not mere tasks on a checklist, but rigorous experiments in living our values each day. Begin each morning with a focused journaling session. In a dedicated Stoic notebook, inscribe a concise reflection on a recent situation where you resorted to silence in hopes of provoking a reaction. Recount the event with unflinching honesty, what prompted your withdrawal, what you felt in that moment, and the outcome that ensued. Then, interrogate your motives. Pinpoint whether your silence was a bid for control, a protective retreat, or an alignment with inner virtue. Finally, envisage an alternative response rooted in Stoic clarity, one where your action, whether words or silence, stems from reason and integrity. This exercise trains the mind to distinguish between reflexive impulses and deliberate choices. Midday, practice intentional pauses during routine interactions. Whether in conversation with a colleague, a friend, or even in solitary tasks, introduce deliberate moments of calm observation. Resist the urge to fill every silence with speech or reaction. Instead, observe the flow of your thoughts and sensations without judgment. Note the subtle shifts in your emotional state as you grant space for reflection. This discipline tempers the instinct to weaponize silence, transforming it into a mindful tool that fosters equanimity rather than conflict. At mid-afternoon, engage in a brief session of negative visualization tailored to communication. Close your eyes and simulate several scenarios in which your silence fails to influence another, or worse, is misunderstood. Imagine the unaltered conversation, the perplexity in another's gaze, the continuation of behaviors you wish to curb. As these visions unfold, anchor yourself in the understanding that your value and serenity do not hinge on external reactions. When the real world mirrors these imagined misfires, you will meet them with composed acceptance rather than frustration. Toward evening, revisit your personal values list. In clear declarative sentences, reaffirm the Stoic virtues you choose to embody. Today, I speak only to bring truth. I remain silent only to preserve justice. Repeat these affirmations silently before engaging in any important interaction or contemplation. By reiterating your values with intention, you reinforce the internal compass that guides both speech and silence. Finally, conclude your day with a reflective dialogue in writing. Address an imaginary interlocutor, a representation of your inner critic, or of another whose response you once sought to influence. In this written exchange, articulate your principles candidly, explaining why you choose silence or speech, grounded in justice, courage, wisdom, and temperance. This exercise crystallizes the link between Stoic theory and personal application, converting abstract precepts into the lived narrative of your daily life. Through consistent practice of these exercises, morning journaling, midday pauses, negative visualization, value reaffirmation, and reflective dialogue, you cultivate an unshakable foundation of self-mastery. Each repetition strengthens the neural pathways of intentional action, aligning your silence and your speech with the highest Stoic ideals. Over time, these rituals transform not only how you communicate with others, but how you govern your mind, forging a sovereign spirit undeterred by the capricious currents of external judgment. Section 6. Real-world applications. Having forged the principles and practices of Stoicism into a refined inner discipline, we turn now to the domain where theory meets life, the intricate tapestry of human engagement. Whether in our deepest bonds, our professional endeavors, or the vast arenas of public discourse, the Stoic approach to silence and speech must permeate every interaction with conscious purpose and unwavering integrity. In the sphere of intimate connections, silence becomes a mirror reflecting our inner state. When tensions stir, the Stoic does not recoil into muteness as a means of punishment or withdrawal. Instead, quietude is embraced as an invitation to self-examination and emotional regulation. In that stillness, one discerns the underlying impulses, hurt, pride, fear, and allows reason to sift these raw materials. Only after this internal alchemy does one speak, articulating concerns with calm precision and honesty. Silence thus evolves from a punitive device into a sacred interval of insight, ensuring that subsequent words emerge not from volcanic emotion, but from level-headed clarity, reinforcing trust and mutual understanding. Within the corridors of professional life, where ambitions and egos often clash, the Stoic's silent poise signifies strength rather than surrender. In moments of conflict or disagreement, the practitioner does not capitulate to a standoff of withheld communication. Rather, silence is wielded as a strategic pause, a space in which arguments are measured and perspectives weighed. This disciplined restraint communicates respect for the process of reasoned discourse, inviting others to present their views fully before response. When speech finally resumes, it carries the authority of reflection, offering solutions or critiques colored by temperance and guided by justice. In this manner, silence and speech unite to foster a culture of thoughtful collaboration rather than impulsive reaction. In the vast realms of public and digital debate, the Stoic adapts these same principles to resist the impulsive urge to dominate or retaliate. When faced with provocative claims or hostile commentary, silence becomes a protective barrier that shields the mind from the corrosive effects of reactive indignation. Within the quiet, the Stoic contemplates whether engagement will serve the common good or merely feed discord. If engagement is warranted, it takes the form of a measured response, concise, reasoned, and unencumbered by ad hominem provocation. Through this balanced interplay, silence remains the guardian of inner peace, while speech serves as the instrument of constructive influence. Across these varied arenas, the unifying thread lies in the Stoic's capacity to align every moment of silence and every word spoken with the bedrock of virtue. Silence is chosen not to elicit guilt or wield power, but to cultivate self-mastery and preserve clarity. Speech is offered not to assert dominance, but to uphold truth and facilitate understanding. In weaving these principles into the fabric of real-world interactions, the Stoic does not enact rigid formulas. Rather, one breathes life into ancient wisdom, demonstrating through conduct that tranquility and influence spring from the same source, a mind governed by reason, anchored in virtue, and unshakable in the face of life's unpredictable currents. As we reach the end of this journey, take a moment to honor the progress you've made. You have peeled back the veil on the futility of coercive silence, laid bare the Stoic foundations that ground your power in virtue, and equipped yourself with practices that transform each choice, spoken or unspoken, into a testament of your inner strength. In embracing these teachings, you reclaim the one domain truly within your control, the domain of your mind. May you carry forward this Stoic resolve with gratitude for the lessons unearthed in discomfort, for the clarity born of reflection, and for the unshakable serenity that blooms when you align action with principle. Remember that every pause can be a moment of insight, every interval of quiet a sanctuary for your soul. If this exploration stirred something within you, I invite you to join our community of seekers. Like this video to affirm your commitment, share it with someone who might benefit from Stoic clarity, and subscribe for more insights on living with purpose, resilience, and tranquility. Ring the bell so you never miss a chance to strengthen your sovereign spirit. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stand firm in virtue, speak with integrity, and rest in the calm of your sovereignty.